Okay, so it's only bad enough we see that a lot of people are faced with unemployment and having to deal with COVID 19. But to have people who are in power or have a political seat in the world to say things that are outright racist, it just makes things all clear that we are not only fighting against the pandemic, and we're fighting against the injustice of being put out of our homes and having to deal with um, people who are totally disconnected from the lives of regular people who are working class people. But we also have this flagrant attitude in the White House of racism, and it's coded in words and sometimes not coded. And so I'm going to read this article, and I read many articles, but some of this stuff is not a surprise, as I know many have seen many videos where you see people who are really overtly racist and outrightly racist. And now we're seeing it in the White House, and it is so evident. We already were seeing it, but it's just now there's a time where we're living in where people are actually coming out and saying things that you think would get them fired or terminated, but it hasn't done that. It's only elevated them because they're motivating and emboldening a base of individuals who wanted to see this happen. And so, Ohio Republicans against Trump. So, while we have this bickering back and forth between Democrats and Republicans, we have some Republicans who are not happy about the decisions that Trump has been making. But we also have some people who are right out speaking out and saying who they really are. They're not hiding themselves. And so this article is going to reveal a bit of that. So he no longer deserves the consent of the governed. And this is by Phil Heimlich, opinion contributor. And what's sad about this is when I was looking at it, it was actually what I had seen. I remember seeing this as a child when I was just at the age of 4 years old, 4 or 5 years old. And I believe I might have been like 4 or 5-ish. And yeah, I can remember that far back. The reason being is because I remember going to Arkansas, and I remember seeing what looked like they tried to take off of a sign, but they didn't wash it off, they didn't paint it well, but it said colored. And it looked like a little water fountain area where you drink water. And the roads, they were dirt road, like dirt. There's some of the roads that were like dirt roads, and all this field area where you could see cows, maybe horses. And believe it or not, it was a place that I guess my mother was telling me about how she lived during the Jim Crow era. At the time, I didn't really know much about it. Of course, being so that I'm an adult and I read multiple articles and books on it, I understand now. But I asked her, I remember asking her, what is that? Why is it that the words, the letters are still there? And she said, I'll explain to you when you get older. And then when I did get older, old enough to comprehend what was going on, I realized what had happened, what she lived through, which was very unpleasant. And so, in getting them into this article, we're in a time in 2020 where we're dealing with a pandemic, and it's evident that you see the racial disparities, not only in economics, in the financial division of this pandemic, but also it's in every area. It affects, you have housing, you have some of these policies that are being made. There's some things that were in place to present protections for people of color, and now they're trying to take those protections away, namely in housing. And of all things, you would think they wouldn't do that at a time like this when people need it the most. And now there's an attack on, just people who are struggling and without the means to make ends meet. So in 2016, many of us in this article, it says, who wanted change in the White House took a chance on Donald Trump. Now, I personally, I will say I did not vote for him. And I believe I made a great choice on not voting for him, unlike others who did. And we see what that result is. So we thought that he'd lead a conservative Republican as a conservative Republican. Instead, he has imperiled our republic. So we are alarmed by the anti-democratic tactics and flagrant abuse of power committed daily by Donald Trump. His actions are an affront to our Constitution and the Republican Party. So these are Republicans who are not particularly happy about the way he's governing things. And so our 18th president, Ohio Ulysses S. Grant, called his failures errors in judgment, not intent. So in 2016, many Ohio voters put their faith in Donald Trump, us included. That was an error of judgment, not intent. So for these reasons, we're joining with other Republicans in the state to vote against President Trump this November. And so that, I wanted people to hear that. You have Republicans who are not happy about the way Donald Trump is handling things and governing things, and they are going to vote against him. His own Republican Party. So corruption, incompetence, and death. He has created a culture of fear within the Republican Party, as well as across the country, demonizing anyone with differing opinions. He belittles, berates, and ruins the careers of all who opposes him, including his own appointed government agency heads, respected military leaders, and war heroes. So he has undermined the rule of law, obstructed justice, and issued pardons and commutations to personal cronies who helped cover up his misdeeds. And we know who some of those people are. He recently pardoned some people out of prison, personal friends and acquaintances of his. So he has demonstrated gross incompetence during COVID-19 pandemic, causing needless suffering and death. He has run up a 2.7 trillion budget deficit, 1 trillion of which occurred before the pandemic unfolded. So this is coming from Ohio. Senator says, okay, so look. Now this right here is a related article and it doesn't look good. Okay, so I just want to read this article, and it says, Ohio senator says coloreds get COVID from bad hygiene. That is an article that's sort of in relation, well, it's not a good phrase, not a good thing to be saying. And it brings me back to a time where people would stereotype people based on what they look like or what nationality or background they're from, and discriminate them and come up with all kinds of stereotypes so that it can further create division, within different people. And so this is a huge problem. And so you have people who are in high seats that are making statements like this. This is not good. But it is not a surprise, being it shows that who we have in office. So getting back to this short article, it's not that long. It says that he has, as the late Senator John McCain put it, abased himself before a tyrant, referring to Trump's refusal to stand up to Russian President Vladimir Putin and protect our elections from foreign interference. He has turned his back on NATO allies we have embraced for 75 years. And so he has shamed us by diminishing our standing as a stalwart republic and defender of democracy worldwide. So in December of 2019, conservative commentator Bill Kristol and attorney George Conway formed the Lincoln Project to encourage Republican voters to support Joe Biden for president. Republican Voters Against Trump was formed by longtime Republican strategist Sarah Longwell, Tim Miller, former spokesman for the Republican National Committee, and Kristol to build Republican support against the re-election of Donald Trump. So Ohio Republicans are now launching Operation Grant to mobilize GOP voters in the Buckeye State, which is crucial to GOP White House hopefuls against our current president. Our leadership consists of Phil Heimlich, the author of the former assistant prosecutor and Republican City Council member and Hamilton County Commissioner Chris Gangan, former Belmont County GOP chairman who resigned in disgust after Trump's Helsinki debacle, Roger Arsenberg, former chairman of the Republican Party. Notice they say former of the Republican Party and Board of Elections in Cleveland, and indicate an inductee into the Cuyahoga County Republic Hall of Fame. Chris Gibbs, former Republican chairman and Board of Election president in Shelby County, and Michael Ann Johnson, former assistant U.S. attorney in Northern District of Ohio. So we are free men and women, and we claim our rights to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, and we believe Mr. Trump no longer deserves the consent of the governed. And so Trump has routinely evaded the call to rise to the moment and lead this great nation, and we will not make the same mistake this November that we made in 2016. So you don't have to either. So after the Civil War, President Grant rose to the moment to unite a nation most divided. Ohioans who wish to preserve our republic will rise to the moment too. So basically that's the article. So you have a lot of Republicans that are not happy about the way Donald Trump has governed. So now this article right here happens to be an Ohio senator, and so, which I'm assuming he might possibly be a Republican. I'm not sure. I didn't really read into it. But maybe that's why this article is here, because maybe he's one that doesn't get along with Trump. So, usually what these politicians do, they're all, they're all not perfect. And so when one has a fallout with another, they tend to dig up whatever dirt on each other and then mudsling. And so multiple articles will come out about something they said in the past, something they did in the past. It's not to excuse it, but it's evident that there is something going on in the White House when you have so many people that are in political seats that have walked away. They produce books about him in regard to how he governs or he doesn't govern correctly, what other things about him might seem that they're not really safe in terms of him being in his political seat. We've heard that there's been books like what Omarosa, um, books from I believe it's John Bolton. And then there's been books from various other individuals, books from even Donald Trump's niece, I believe it's his niece, where, you know, multiple people have said that he should not be in his political seat, that he's not fit to be president of the United States. And so we don't know how this is going to turn out, but like I've said in previous articles, previous videos, that I believe with what's happening now, where a lot of people are not really sure whether they're going to even have a place to live, that these moratoriums are just temporary and they're holding people up just until they are able to vote. And once you vote for the same individuals, you will be left high and dry. You'll be left hanging in the wind without a life without a life jacket. There'll be this water underneath you, and it's deep, 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 and you won't have any life jacket, no net to save you. And I believe that is what is going on, and it's happening already in some cities, some states, where people are being tossed out of their homes. They basically followed suit. They followed the rules. They followed the rules of going home to try to stay safe and closing down businesses with the impression that maybe they would get a control of this and people would be able to go back to work. They'd be able to feed their families. They'd be able to resume life as normal. No vaccine in sight, no money in sight. The stimulus package that they've been fighting back and forth over, there's no $1,200 check in sight. And the first $1,200 check, there was really no real relief, except maybe you could buy maybe a few groceries with it, and maybe pay a bill or two, but you might not couldn't even do that, depending on the way this world is operating for some. In some of these cities and metropolitan cities, the rents are already more than a $1,200 check. It is like $2,000-3,000 a month just to live in a unit if you're paying rent, if you're a renter. And so these checks are not enough. They are just enough maybe to feed you, and if you're holding on and you're halting rents, that bill is incurring, it's increasing. It's not going to cover what's going to happen soon. And I believe that a lot of people are being duped. They're being persuaded to vote. They're going to be distracted by all these other little issues, things that are coming up. And then before you know it, the net is going to be pulled right out from under you. And so I'm forewarning you. So if you've got Republicans who are not happy about this president, and this is his own party that is against him, you should really consider who, if you're able to vote, who you should be voting for. And be careful of what new people are out there that are trying to get a seat in office, because from what I'm seeing, not many of them are wrapped too tight, so they have emotional issues and other things. And do you really trust people like that to lead a whole country? And I don't know if anybody can remember as far back as I remember. I have, great memory. I remember where people were afraid, and this was a year, I don't know if it was Reagan that was president or Bush. They were afraid that we were going to go to war. They were afraid that if that president pushed this red button, and I believe it was Reagan that was president at the time, that we would go to war. And that there was this movie that came out, it was called The Day After Tomorrow, or The Day After, and it was about presidential fallout, dealing with foreign governments and having disagreements. And all they had to do was push a red button, or they had to get the word to deploy nukes. And this was what the fear was back then, is that two huge governments would go head to head and fight, and I believe it was the U.S. and then the USSR, Russia, because they're just as big as the U.S. and that they were going to have this horrible war, and that what could probably end up happening is it could wipe out people, and we as Americans would be casualties. And what reminded me of that was when they started talking about the Korean president, South Korean, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, Kim Jong Un. That he was just as ruthless in governing, and he was more about military spending and more about putting the money in military weaponry rather than feeding people in the country, and that they would be most equipped to actually deploy nukes, and that there was a fear that he might be pointing one this way to America, because there were threats of that, because there was supposed to be a talk between him and Donald Trump, and that didn't go so well, or it was looking like it wasn't really getting off the ground, or it was just for show, and that he was still actually working on building weapons. And I wouldn't be surprised if that's what's still going on now, but the worry and the fear was not a pandemic, but not economic collapse, but it was going to be massive destruction on a large scale where multiple people would, as casualties, die from the aftermath of a nuclear warfare. And I don't know if people, if you lived in a time where you remember hearing talks of that. And the only closest to that was when they mentioned the issues between Kim Jong-un and Donald Trump, and him when he kept calling him Rocket Man, and they were having these back and forth bickers. So a lot of people said that, who are notables, that people that are in the White House and that are really in tune with what's going on, that you need to have a certain demeanor about yourself when you're talking to foreign governments, and how to talk to them and address certain issues, so that it doesn't become a shouting match. It doesn't become something where innocent people and lives of people get hurt or scarred by it. And so it was so scary. I remember seeing this movie. I think it was The Day After Tomorrow, the day after. It was basically a movie about when two countries can't get along, and then they deploy nukes, and America took a huge hit, where, and I think Vivica A. Fox was in it, believe it or not, and there was some other people. The president survived, a few people survived, and it looked like a war-torn destruction you wouldn't ever see. It was pretty much the whole country was leveled by this nuclear explosion. And not one, I believe, it was many. And so people were having to put together the pieces of their lives, literally. I mean, everything gone. And that was in an instant. There was no economic battle or anything. It was just a battle for survival to stay alive. And there were people, you could see parts of their skin hanging off, their hair. It looked like there was radiation from whatever the nuclear explosion. It caused them to have damaged hair, where parts of their hair was long on one side and short on the other. It looked like their body had been partially singed. So it was awful. And it just goes to show that, these talks, these wars, these battles, result in chaos and destruction. And so yet we have homegrown battles and wars, and now we have this pandemic, and it's causing the start of some other turn of events in the world. And it doesn't look good. We had a lot of death that happened this year, and a lot more death that's coming because of the bad decisions that people are making and the bad choices they're making. So it's not one person at fault here. Um, so with that being said, I'm gonna let this video go, but yeah, this is not looking good, not by a long shot. And I just want to say that I don't know what is going on, except that I believe that there's fear to the extreme to where people are even driving crazy on the road. I don't know, have you experienced where you get on the road and you're driving your car, people are starting not to follow the street signs, they're speeding ahead of people, cutting people off, they're not being careful on the road. If COVID doesn't kill you, if some kind of racist act doesn't kill you, then, a car accident. Because people are not following the rules of the road. It is affecting people in such great ways that it is so dangerous. You can't even feel safe even driving in your car. Well, I never really felt completely safe. But, there was a level of, accountability. And now it almost seems like people are starting to throw that out of the window, even when they're on the road driving. So keep your phones with your cameras handy because you might need that. Having said this, like, comment, subscribe. Thanks for listening.